Boxing Truth here. I want to talk about this James Degale situation brewing with Chris Eubank Jr. and how James Degale is actually avoiding a lucrative showdown, a lucrative payday to fight Chris Eubank Jr. in the place that makes the most sense in the UK. Now, why would Degale put this showdown off, not even consider it, going to as to stating that he's not willing to give Eubank Jr. the chance, even though he knows it would be a lucrative fight to be made in England, as they could possibly put the fight on Eubank's new platform on ITV pay-per-view. And I'm pretty sure there was people that bought the showcase fight with Reynold Quinlan, so I'm pretty sure people would buy, for the same price, of course, 10 pounds. I'm sure a lot of people would buy a potential Eubank Jr. versus James Degale fight. But there are rumors rumbling that Greg Leone reported this, the old boxing talk writer guy, that perhaps Callum Smith is in the works to be Degale's next opponent. Now, Degale, he has mandatory obligations. However, the IBF has rules where only the IBF champion, they could request an exemption from the IBF, which means they could bypass the mandatory if they request to do so. However, the reigning champion of the IBF has to pay a fee for an exemption to the IBF, $20,000 according to the rules, in order to bypass the mandatory, especially since the mandatory is not very desirable, and that is the case with James Degale's mandatory. I mean, why the fuck are you going to fight this pointless mandatory? His mandatory is Jose Ugutaski. I can't really pronounce his last name. I've seen him fight a couple times, but it's not a big money fight for Degale. Degale's been exposed his last two fights. He got his ass whooped against Battle Jack. He got his ass whooped against Porky Medina, and he's been in some tough fights lately, ever since he's reached the top level, the world-class level, and he hasn't really performed that great in many of his fights. Got two gifted draws. So it's a risk for Degale to fight this Ugataski fellow who's not a bad fighter, and he's in the mandatory position for his belt. So why fight this guy for peanuts when he could fight possibly a bigger fight? The fight that really makes the most sense for him, and that's this Chris Eubank Jr. showdown. There's a little kind of a rivalry there. There's history between the two. It's a good storyline, and it's a fight I think that Eubank's father will actually let him fight in, because it's a fight I think that his father believes his son could actually win. When it comes to Golovkin, that's all bullshit. That's just for promotion. But when it comes to Degale, I truly feel Eubank Jr.'s father really feels his son could defeat James Degale. Now, of course, there is some risk involved for Degale. I mean, he doesn't want to give Eubank Jr. the payday, even though it makes all the sense in the world to take this fight. But there is a downside. He could get embarrassed. He can get exposed by a protected fighter in Eubank Jr. No one wants to get beat and exposed by a protected fighter. I shit on Degale a lot. I do. He ain't that good. It's just that his fans think he's great, but he's not. Just another okay fighter. But at least he's challenged himself. At least he's pursued challenges. At least he's fought at the world-class level. At least he's tried to find out how good he is. And we all know how good he is now. He's not that good, but he is a world-class fighter. He's participated at that level. He's competed at that level. He's fought the top guys in his division. So you have to give him credit for that. He's shown balls in his career. He's tough. He's got a lot of heart. He just ain't that good. But he's shown a lot more in his career than compared to Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. is a glorified showcase fighter. I'm a fan, but I keep it real. I think he's an exciting fighter, Eubank Jr. I think he's got a lot of tools to compete at the world-class level. He has a great gas tank. He has great stamina. He throws a lot of punches. He has good speed. The only problem is he hasn't really shown great power as he's raised his level of competition. So he doesn't really have that concussive power at the world class level, but he definitely has other tools that he can compete with world class fighters. But he's definitely a protected fighter. He's fought nobody, British level opponents, domestic showdowns, and he's got a fake ass world title in the IBO. So Degale, there's upside. He can make a big payday. It's still a winnable fight. I still view it as a close 50-50 fight in my view, even though Eubank Jr. has success against Degale in the past in their sparring sessions. Claims to have whooped his ass on his own at his own gym. But it's definitely a 50-50 fight in my eyes because Degale has more experience. He's fought better competition. He can definitely cause some problems to Eubank, who, as Eubank has shown some vulnerabilities to movement, like he saw in the first half of the fight against Billy Joe Saunders. However, there's a risk involved for Degale. He's coming off bad performances. He got his ass whooped, beat up a little. He got beat up a lot his last two fights, especially against Badu Jack. So his prime is slowly being drained apart from him after all these ass whoopings he's receiving. So he could be a shell of himself after that beatdown he took against Battle Jack. And it's definitely a winnable fight for Eubank Jr. He could really put it on Degale and pretty much will be the last hurrah for Degale, his last payday, if he can't get this victory in a potential fight against Eubank Jr. But it looks like Degale is going to go into another direction. There's rumblings of Callum Smith. But let me ask y'all, which fight would y'all rather see? Callum Smith or Eubank Jr.? Now, I know Callum Smith is an easier fight to make because he works with Eddie Hearn. And Degale has a working relationship with Eddie Hearn. I'm not sure if he's still contracted to him. I believe he's a free agent now. So there's no excuses for why Degale can't make a fight with Eubank Jr. He should at least call Eubank Sr.'s bluff to see if they're really serious about taking this fight, to see if they're really going to sit down and negotiate for a fight for possibly this summer and what would be a big domestic showdown, a rivalry, storyline, and I feel it's a winnable fight for both guys. But it's definitely risky for Degale to possibly get exposed by a protected fake-ass champion in Eubank Jr. and for Jr. just to pick up a real strap, and then he becomes really he's on his way to bigger stardom. I consider Jr. possibly a bigger star right now than Degale. Degale hasn't fought in the UK in a number of years. He's desperate for a homecoming. He's been away from home. He's been fighting on Heyman cards, undercards, in front of not a lot of people. A good crowd turned out for his last fight at the Barclays Center for Badu Jack. He got whooped, got a gift draw, but he's still relevant in the super middleweight division, still holds the IBF strap, and his team has to figure out his next move, but he definitely should not fight his mandatory. Request for an exception. I'm sure he'll get it, and he could fight possibly a bigger fight in his home country, whether that be Callum Smith, who I view is not as big a fight as Eubank Jr., but it's an easier fight to make because they both have a working relationship with Eddie Hearn. Or if he is a free agent, he could possibly fight Eubank Jr., which I feel is a much bigger fight, a much more interesting fight, a more lucrative fight. And let's see if the Eubanks are serious about this fight, this showdown. And they could possibly make a much more extra quid if they put this fight on Eubank Jr.'s platform on ITV. Degale's team should consider it. If they're free agents, they have no issues of fighting on Eubank's platform, put it on pay-per-view for about 10 quid and see how many buys it does. I think it makes business sense. I think the fight should happen in the summer, should happen next. But you have to just wonder if Degale is up for this task. For some reason doesn't want to give Eubank Jr. the payday. Possibly doesn't want to get exposed by a glorified showcase fighter, protected fighter, and a fake world champion, the IBO champion, and Chris Eubank Jr. But y'all let me know what y'all think. Which fight would y'all rather see? James Degale, Callum Smith, or James Degale versus Chris Eubank Jr.? I already told you which fight I'd rather see. But this is Boxing Truth. I'm out.